So just to move on to our next jump start, today we're going to be talking about Noah's Notes from Haruto Ikizawa, who has had a few series in Jump before. I think Kurogane was one of them. I believe this is the same person behind Mononofu that also had a Jump Start debut in the Viz Shonen Jump. And I think there's one other series that I'm probably forgetting, maybe, I don't know, off the top of my head. But this artist has had a few series in Jump at this point, so it's interesting to see this person come back. So essentially, I don't know how much I want to give away about Noah's Notes because I don't want to accidentally spoil anything. But essentially, we have this young high school girl named Kotobuki who basically just has no interest in school, let alone history in particular. Her grades are failing. She just doesn't care about school. She just wants to live in the moment and have fun and all that. And she accidentally comes across this neat little rock in an alleyway, and she posts it on her Twitter and whatnot, and I'm sure it got a lot of likes. But then the post gets taken down, and she's basically visited at school by a very eccentric archaeologist. And so basically he takes her hostage in order to, because he's basically offended by her, like, distaste and disinterest in history. And he takes offense to it as somebody who really loves history and is very, very passionate about his work.
It's very over the top. He flies in with a helicopter and smashes into the window to break into her classroom in order to take her away. And, she's like a couple stories up.
It literally holds a gun to her mouth, and it gets a little extreme almost.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, essentially, just to kind of, again, I don't want to give away too much, but essentially the long and short of it is, the more that Kotobuki hangs out with Noah, she kind of starts to become at least a little more interested in just history in general and everything. And, she starts to learn about this huge conspiracy that she starts to become like sort of involved in because of Noah's research and everything. And it leads to a lot of really like earth-shattering revelations that I think I would personally put on the level of Astro Lost in Space if our listeners have read that. So I'm sure, Sid, did you get that vibe from reading this at all? Because that's the kind of vibe I got.
It's a very similar twist to the one in Astro Lost in Space. I don't know if we want to spoil it. I guess we're going to avoid it. But considering the premise of the series is predicated on that, basically they are trying to figure out what happened in the past and prevent it from happening again. And it is a conspiracy that is being covered up by a lot of different parties, but Noah and his group, all expert specialists in their field, are trying to uncover this mystery and prevent whatever calamity might threaten humanity in just a few short years in 2022. And so Mirai, she doesn't think that history is very important at the beginning. She thinks, oh, what does that have to do with my future to know history? But what I like about the series is, she learns that, yeah, it's important to learn about the past in order to guide your future. And Noah chooses like a very great example of, hey, you are planning out your future based on your mom's history. You know what made your mom happy in life, and so that is why you are aspiring to the same thing. I really like that he kind of breaks down history on a personal level like that in order to teach her what is so important. And what I really like about this series is that, much in the same way with Dr. Stone, and how Dr. Stone is making kids see, hey, science is really cool. Learning about science lets you do all these awesome things. Noah's Notes is basically doing the same for history and saying, hey, if you learn about history, you'll know really important things that can help you out in life. And I think that's a really cool thing, a really great message, and a nice thing to predicate a series around, on top of this really cool conspiracy angle to this plot, and this apocalyptic thing they're trying to stop, and like all these different things that they're trying to study and figure out what is going to cause the impending apocalypse, trying to learn the secrets of what happened in the past in order to figure out what happened and how to prevent what is about to happen, and that there's a competing organization who is apparently evolved in every great and terrible happening in human history, that is a religious organization called the Knights Templar. It's like, there's a lot of really cool elements to this series. It's got a really cool message. I really do feel it has a lot in similar with Dr. Stone, in terms of what it's setting out to do, and like connecting to, hey, kids, get interested in this thing because it's really cool. And I'm kind of hoping, like with Dr. Stone, that will be appealing to readers in Japan, especially young readers, and it will allow the series to find its audience and continue forward, because I was very impressed with it. It's a lot of fun. It's really funny. Again, all those things I said before about, its themes and messages and stuff I really like. So yeah, I mean, I like Haruto Ikizawa a lot. I mean, I really enjoyed Mononofu from what I read of it. And I think, like, he's a talented writer, so I'm hoping, this will be his My Hero Academia. He's had, like, 2 series that didn't really last a while, didn't really find their audience, and maybe with Noah's Notes, he'll have his My Hero Academia and a series that, hey, third time, hits it big with a series that's super popular.
Yeah, Noah's Notes really hit me in a particular way in that I feel like I really related to Mirai in that, I've mentioned it probably a little bit when we talked about stuff like We Never Learn, like when I was in high school, like I was never really a huge fan of school. Like, I basically went to school because I felt like I had to. And because, hey, my friends were there and I get to see them every day. So that's cool and all. But, like there were very few like classes and lessons that I took in school that like I was actually interested in learning. And kind of like with Dr. Stone, where like, science was probably my worst class. I probably didn't, like, on average, I would maybe get like a C in science. Like, but at the very least, like, my science classes had that advantage of, oh, hey, we can, do all these really cool experiments and dissect all these animals and stuff. And, so some of that stuff was fun. I at least got science was a little more hands-on, even though I didn't always get like straight A's in science, obviously. History was probably one of my hardest subjects, I guess, because because like, at least with my classes, it was mostly just, this teacher just droning on and on and on about all this stuff that happened however long ago, and I just don't care because it's I totally related to Mirai in that, oh, this is never gonna like help me in real life. Like, what am I gonna get out of this? Like, I'd rather be on my phone doing whatever. Like, I totally relate to this character in particular. And so that's one of my favorite moments in Noah's Notes you mentioned earlier, where it's like, Noah explains history in a way where like, that's interesting to her. And, cause she mentions how like this guy is actually showing me like how history it can be important to me, and isn't just like, oh, well, it's important because it's important. Like, how they kind of show in the beginning of the first chapter where, she's constantly confronting her teachers about like, trying to ask him like, hey, like, how is this stuff going to be important to me? Can you answer that? And they're just like, well, it's important because it is. And, she's obviously tired of that attitude from all of her teachers. And, and Noah's sort of important to her in that, again, he is the one person who's been able to paint history in this interesting light and show how it's important to her. And it actually, whether she wants to admit it or not, actually makes the subject more interesting to her, which again, I thought was a really smart moment, and was something that I felt like I could really relate to personally, again, as somebody who wasn't really a fan of history. Like, really nowadays, like, I don't know if this is bad of me to say, but like, it's only really like recently, as like the older I get and the more I guess the more adult I become, that I'm actually interested in learning stuff, I guess. Again, school, like I said, just really wasn't my thing at all. So I wish series like Dr. Stone and Noah's Notes were published around when I was in high school, because I think if I had these growing up, I would have been at least a little more interested in the subjects that I had to learn in school. Like, I think it would have had a positive impact on me.
I think that's what makes it so great, is that, a lot of students feel like how you felt, Colton, in that they weren't interested in these subjects and they didn't understand, like, how they would benefit them in the future, what relevance they had, and so they didn't care about them. But we have series like Noah's Notes and Dr. Stone explaining, hey, these things are cool and important to know, because if you know these things, they can help you do these really cool things that can make your life a lot better. And I think the way Noah's Notes describes history and why knowing history is so important by applying that personal connection was just super smart and really perceptive of, like, what intrigues students, and especially, like, young teenagers, and, like, what they value and, like, what they would want to know, and, like, really has an understanding of, like, how to present this as interesting to younger audiences and, like, make them engage with, like, a subject that in school might be taught just too, straight and didactic for them to really get invested in. But, by applying, like, a personal narrative to the history, then you can get someone really excited and into it. And for me, as someone who has always loved learning about history, and that was, like, my best subject, and I've always loved to learn, I really enjoy seeing a manga like Noah's Notes be able to articulate why learning about history is cool and important in such a fun and engaging way. And the same thing goes for Dr. Stone. And I like learning things, so having these two series, be great pieces of entertainment with really intriguing stories and characters on top of, teaching you some interesting stuff. Dr. Stone more so than Noah's Notes so far, because it's focused on a fictional history rather than, like, real historical facts. But all the same, I really like the sentiments of both, and that really appeals to me. And I'm hoping, just like with Dr. Stone, again, that Noah's Notes will hit a nerve with younger audiences reading Jump, and that can propel it to some success.
Yeah, because it would be a real shame if this, got canceled, because I really do think this has potential to maybe hit it big, or at least strike a nerve with younger audiences. I don't know. I really just I don't want to see this end, because I really think the story can go, there's a lot of potential here for the story to go to some really great, really interesting places. And I really want to see how everything ends, because, like, that final shot in the first chapter, a lot of the narration in that first chapter is basically her narrating the events of the story, like, after everything has happened. And you can plainly see that from, like, the very last shot of the first chapter, with the camera kind of, like, zooming out of, like, the room she's in. And you could clearly see that, like, everything around, like, there are ruins around her. So, like, you don't know if, like, you really legitimately don't know whether they, like, stop this catastrophe that's going to happen, or if, like you legitimately don't know what's going to happen. And so, like, I don't know, that really makes me interested in seeing, like, what the end game of this series is. So I don't know if this will get picked up for the Viz Jump, but again, I hope this is something that maybe, if it continues, then maybe further down the line that it'll get picked up by Viz for a volume release or something. Because, man, I felt the exact opposite about the series than I did, like, Jujutsu Kaisen, where it's like, man, I want more of this. Or it's like, I was pretty much hooked by the end of the first chapter. Like, I need more of this. I need more of this, and I need more of Act Age stat.
Yeah. Just like Act Age, I was, like, so intrigued by the series that I was really excited to read more, and, I'm really hoping we can read more in the future. I think that it's very unlikely that any series will be added to the Viz Jump until something that's already running in there ends, so I'm not expecting Noah's Notes to get picked up, but I'm hoping that it is successful in Japan so that eventually we will get volume releases.
Yeah. We want more Noah's Notes. I like that should be recommendation enough.
Yes, basically.